There is a quiet force shaping the direction of almost every human life. Most people rarely notice it. They believe their decisions come from thought. They believe their actions come from logic. They assume their lives are guided by careful reasoning. But if you observe human behavior closely, a different truth begins to appear. Most people are not controlled by logic. They are controlled by emotion. Anger decides what they say in moments of conflict. Fear decides which opportunities they refuse to take. Anxiety fills their imagination with worries about futures that have not yet arrived. And the desire for approval quietly shapes the way they behave around others. Over time, these emotional reactions begin guiding the direction of their lives. Careers are chosen because of fear. Dreams are abandoned because of doubt. Relationships are maintained because of insecurity. And many decisions people believe were rational were actually emotional reactions that happened too quickly to question. The strange part is that most people never stop long enough to notice this pattern. They move from one emotional state to another. Anger one moment, anxiety the next. Excitement, jealousy, frustration, hope, disappointment. Their internal world constantly shifts depending on what happens around them. And when your internal state constantly changes in response to external events, your life becomes reactive. You are no longer guiding your direction. You are responding to whatever happens. But there is another way to live, a quieter way, a stronger way, a way practiced by philosophers, leaders, and disciplined thinkers for thousands of years. It begins with mastering something most people never attempt to master: their own emotions. The Stoic philosophers believed emotional mastery was the foundation of true strength, not the strength that comes from physical power, not the strength that comes from social status, but the strength that comes from inner stability. They understood something deeply important about human nature. The world itself rarely controls us. Our reactions to the world do. This insight may seem simple, but when it is truly understood, it changes the way a person experiences life. Because once you realize your reactions belong to you, something powerful becomes possible. You no longer have to obey every emotion that appears in your mind. You no longer have to react automatically to every impulse. You no longer have to allow temporary feelings to determine permanent decisions. Instead, you can learn to observe your emotions. And once you begin observing them, they begin losing their authority. Most emotional reactions appear instantly. They happen faster than conscious thought. Someone criticizes you. Immediately, irritation appears. Someone doubts your competence. Insecurity quietly enters the mind. A situation becomes uncertain. Anxiety begins filling your imagination. These reactions appear so quickly that most people never question them. They assume their emotions must be correct. They assume their feelings represent reality. But emotions are not always reliable guides. They are interpretations, and interpretations can be wrong. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology attempted to explain the mind. They believed emotions often arise from hidden judgments. A judgment that something is unfair. A judgment that something threatens your reputation. A judgment that life should unfold according to your expectations. Once that judgment appears, emotion follows. But if the judgment changes, the emotional reaction begins to change as well. Think about how often anger appears during ordinary life. Someone interrupts you while you are speaking. Someone disagrees with your opinion. Someone behaves carelessly or disrespectfully. Immediately, frustration rises. But beneath that frustration lies something deeper, an expectation. This situation should go differently. This person should behave better. Things should unfold according to my preferences. Reality refuses to follow the script you imagine. And anger fills the gap between expectation and reality. But the anger did not come directly from the event itself. It came from the belief that the event should be different. Change that belief, and the emotional response begins to soften. This realization is one of the first steps toward emotional discipline. Anxiety reveals another layer of emotional control. The anxious mind craves certainty. It wants guarantees. It wants predictable outcomes. It wants to know what will happen tomorrow. But life has never promised certainty. The future has always been unpredictable. Yet the human mind constantly tries to force certainty where none exists. People replay conversations that have not happened. They imagine failures that have not occurred. They worry about disasters that may never appear. The mind attempts to control the future through imagination, but this effort creates the very anxiety it tries to escape. The Stoics approach this problem differently. Instead of trying to eliminate uncertainty, they learn to accept it. Because once uncertainty is accepted, anxiety begins to lose its power. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself of this truth repeatedly. He wrote that many things in life lie outside our control. The opinions of other people, the behavior of strangers, the direction of events. But one thing always remains within our reach: our response. Once you realize your response belongs to you, emotional mastery becomes possible. You stop trying to control everything around you and begin learning to control yourself. Imagine two people facing the same challenge. Both experience criticism, both encounter failure, both face uncertainty about what will happen next. The first person reacts instantly. Anger clouds their thinking. Frustration spreads through their mind. Their emotions dictate their behavior. The second person pauses. They notice the emotion rising, but they do not obey it. Instead, they ask themselves a simple question: what response would be most useful right now? In that moment, two very different futures begin to form, because emotional reactions shape behavior, and behavior shapes destiny. The disciplined mind develops something rare: distance. Not emotional coldness, but distance between emotion and action. That distance creates space, space to think, space to reflect, space to choose a response rather than reacting automatically. This small gap between emotion and action changes everything, because emotions push people toward immediate reactions, while discipline allows the mind to consider long-term consequences. Modern psychology confirms what Stoic philosophers understood centuries ago. The ability to regulate emotions is one of the strongest predictors of resilience. People who can pause before reacting tend to make better decisions. They manage stress more effectively, they maintain healthier relationships, and they recover from setbacks more quickly. Emotional mastery is not simply philosophical wisdom. It is a practical advantage in life. But mastering your emotions requires practice. It begins with awareness. Most people move through life without observing their emotional patterns. They simply react. But the Stoics practiced observation. They noticed when anger appeared. They recognized when anxiety began to grow. They examined the thoughts accompanying those emotions. Over time, this awareness gave them insight into their own minds. And once something is understood, it becomes easier to change. Another Stoic practice was reflection. At the end of each day, they reviewed their actions. They asked themselves where emotions influenced their behavior, where frustration appeared unnecessarily, where fear prevented them from acting with courage. This reflection was not meant to produce guilt, it was meant to produce clarity. Because the clearer you see your emotional patterns, the easier they become to reshape. Emotional mastery also protects the mind from manipulation. Human interactions often rely on emotional pressure. Some people provoke anger to gain control. Others create urgency to trigger fear. Some offer praise to influence behavior. When someone can control your emotions, they can influence your decisions. But the calm mind becomes difficult to manipulate. It notices emotional pressure. It recognizes attempts to provoke reactions. And because it remains steady, it cannot easily be pushed into decisions it does not want to make. This is another reason emotional discipline quietly creates power. Not loud power, not aggressive power, but psychological strength. Over time, emotional mastery changes how a person sees the world. Situations that once triggered anger become easier to understand. Challenges that once created anxiety become manageable. Uncertainty that once produced fear begins to feel like possibility. Because once the mind becomes calm, it begins seeing reality more clearly. It separates facts from emotional interpretation. It separates possibility from imagination. And it begins responding with thought rather than impulse. As emotional discipline develops, something remarkable begins to appear. Calmness, not the absence of emotion, but control over it. The calm mind can still feel anger, but it does not explode. It can still feel fear, but it does not panic. It can still experience uncertainty, but it does not collapse. Instead, the disciplined mind remains steady. And this steadiness creates clarity. In a world filled with emotional reactions, calmness becomes rare, and anything rare becomes powerful. People instinctively trust individuals who remain composed during chaos, because calmness signals control, and control signals strength. This is why mastering your emotions changes everything. It changes how you think, it changes how you respond, and it changes how the world responds to you. Because the person who cannot control their emotions is constantly reacting to external forces, but the person who masters their emotions begins shaping their own life. And slowly something extraordinary begins to happen. Reactions become choices, impulses become discipline, chaos becomes clarity, and the mind becomes stronger, calmer, more resilient, more refined. Mastering your emotions does not remove the challenges of life, but it transforms how you face them. And that transformation changes everything. There is another transformation that begins to take place when a person develops emotional discipline. It changes the way they experience time itself. Most people live inside emotional immediacy. Whatever they feel in the moment becomes the most important thing in their world. If they feel angry, that anger feels urgent. If they feel anxious, that anxiety feels overwhelming. If they feel insulted, the need to respond feels immediate. Emotion creates a sense of urgency that pushes people toward action before they have time to think. But the disciplined mind learns to resist this urgency. It learns to slow down. It learns to step back from the emotional moment and view the situation from a wider perspective. Instead of asking, "How do I feel right now?" the disciplined mind begins asking a different question. What will matter about this situation tomorrow? Or even more importantly, what will matter about this situation a year from now? This shift in perspective changes everything, because many emotional reactions that feel extremely important in the moment become almost meaningless when viewed from a greater distance. A rude comment from a stranger, a disagreement with a colleague, a mistake made during a stressful day. In the emotional moment, these events can feel enormous, but when viewed from a wider perspective, they often reveal themselves as temporary disturbances that do not deserve the amount of attention we give them. This is one of the hidden benefits of emotional discipline. It allows a person to choose which experiences deserve their emotional energy. Most people give their emotional energy away freely. Every inconvenience receives frustration. Every criticism receives anger. Every uncertainty receives anxiety. But the disciplined mind becomes selective. It begins to recognize that emotional energy is one of the most valuable resources a person possesses. And like any valuable resource, it must be used wisely. When emotional discipline develops, trivial events lose their ability to disturb the mind. Small inconveniences become easier to ignore. Minor criticisms become easier to evaluate calmly. Unexpected problems become easier to approach with patience rather than panic. This change creates something rare in the modern world: mental stability. A person with emotional discipline is not easily shaken. They are not easily provoked. They are not easily overwhelmed by sudden changes. While others react emotionally to every disturbance, the disciplined mind remains steady, and this steadiness creates another powerful advantage. It allows the mind to remain focused. Emotional reactions consume enormous amounts of mental energy. Anger can dominate a person's thoughts for hours. Anxiety can occupy the mind for entire days. Resentment can linger for years. But when emotional discipline develops, the mind becomes less distracted by these reactions. Energy that was once spent worrying or reacting becomes available for thinking, learning, and creating. In other words, emotional discipline frees mental energy. This is one of the reasons many great thinkers throughout history practiced forms of emotional control. They understood that a chaotic mind cannot produce clear thinking, but a calm mind can focus deeply. It can analyze problems carefully, and it can make decisions with clarity rather than confusion. This clarity often becomes a difference between success and failure, because life constantly presents situations where emotional reactions compete with rational decisions. Someone criticizes your work. Your first emotional reaction may be anger or defensiveness. But if the criticism contains useful information, responding emotionally prevents you from learning. Someone doubts your ability. Your first emotional reaction may be insecurity. But responding with discipline allows you to focus on improving instead of proving. Someone behaves unfairly toward you. Your first emotional reaction may be frustration, but responding with calm analysis allows you to choose the most effective course of action instead of reacting impulsively. In each of these situations, emotional discipline creates a small but important advantage, the advantage of clarity, and over time, these small advantages accumulate. They shape the way a person responds to challenges. They shape the way a person makes decisions, and ultimately, they shape the direction of a person's life. This is why mastering your emotions changes everything. Not because emotions disappear, but because they stop controlling your choices. If you are working to strengthen your mind and develop emotional discipline, consider subscribing to The Mind Refined. This channel exists for people who want to think more clearly, live more deliberately, and develop the calm inner strength that Stoic philosophy teaches. Because in a world ruled by emotional reactions, the disciplined mind becomes something rare, and anything rare becomes powerful.